Hey everyone, welcome to our Bible study. Let's talk about 1 Samuel chapter 20 in 5 minutes. You can get this PDF on our website for free if you want to download it for yourself. When did the events of this chapter happen? Well, we're probably in about 1015 BC. Saul is still the king, but he's not going to be king for too many more years. And let's talk about Saul a little bit more in our character section. So Saul was the first king of Israel, but he was rejected by God because he had disobeyed God on several occasions. His replacement had already been selected, and you may be familiar with him. That's David. He would be the second king of Israel. We're also going to talk about Jonathan. Jonathan was Saul's son, but he was also the best friend of David. And him and David are kind of the key characters, main characters in this chapter. And then we go up to our map. In the last chapter, David was in Ramah. At the beginning of this chapter, he flees from Ramah, and he goes to the house of Saul, or around that area, for a couple days. And there's some events that transpire there, which we'll discuss in our outline, which is up next. This chapter is all about David and Jonathan devising a plan to keep David safe from Saul's murderous intentions. Verses 1 through 23, we're going to talk about that, and then the results of their plan are going to be seen in the end of the chapter. So after staying in Ramah with Samuel, David fled because he believed that Saul was still intent on killing him. Now, Jonathan, Saul's son, he wasn't so sure. He wasn't sure that his father was still trying to kill David. Together, though, they devised a plan to figure out what Saul's true intentions were. They wanted to figure out for sure, obviously, before David came back to Saul's house. They got together, and the next day, Saul was going to have a meal for the new moon. David knew that Saul would be expecting him to be at the meal, so he told Jonathan to watch Saul's response when he didn't arrive. Okay? Jonathan was supposed to tell his father that David he couldn't attend because he was going to be in Bethlehem attending a sacrifice that his brother had asked him to be at, and that's why he wasn't there. And based on Saul's response, they would know what Saul's intentions were. So if Saul was content with that answer, then David would assume that Saul wasn't mad at him anymore, he wasn't trying to kill him anymore. But if Saul was really angry because he missed out on a chance to kill David, David would assume that Saul definitely still wanted to kill him. Jonathan told David to hide himself, and he would go up to this meal that his father was hosting to figure out what Saul's intentions were. And when he learned his intentions and the true answer to their question, he would indicate the answer to David using a signal of arrows. Depending on where Jonathan shot these arrows, David would know whether or not it was safe to return to Saul's house or if he needed to flee. Okay, so that's the plan. Before the two men separated, though, the two men made a covenant together, and David promised to always care for the household of Jonathan. And that's going to be a really important promise as we read the rest of their story. This takes us to the end of the chapter, verses 24 through 42. Saul's intentions are revealed. So Jonathan attended his father's new moon meal, and after David didn't show up for 2 days, and Jonathan gave Saul David's excuse, Saul became so angry that he ended up throwing a spear at his son and accusing him of betraying the kingdom and being on David's side. Well, this really grieved Jonathan, and the next morning he got up and he went to the field to signal David with the arrows and the agreed upon signal that they had talked about. Before David fled, though, the two men had the opportunity to say goodbye, and they did so with very heavy hearts. They reassured each other of the covenant that they had made between each other, saying, quote, "The Lord shall be between you and me, and between my offspring and your offspring forever." So that's 1 Samuel chapter 20. Now let's talk about our application. Sometimes good people are oppressed or mistreated by more powerful, evil people. We see this in the case of David. David had never done anything wrong to Saul. He'd only done good to Saul, and yet Saul oppressed him and chased him, and David was constantly on the run. God made human beings with free will, and as a result, sometimes injustices occur. But we need to know for sure that God is not the author of those injustices. The injustices that we see in the world are the result of people choosing to depart from the will of God, right? They mistreat other people because they don't act the way that God told them to act. What we can be sure of also, though, is that God's going to make those injustices right in the end.